Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
From 11FS, this is Fintech Insider News, live from the St. Michael and All Angels Church here in London. I'm Moody, Customer Strategy Director at 11FS, and today we're covering Revolut is poised to target a Middle East banking license as the bank hits 10 million UK users. Chase is reportedly set to offer credit cards in the US, and 28% of UK adults say they have been targeted by a voice cloning scam in the last year, according to research from Starling Bank. To discuss all of this and much more, I am joined by a group of fantastic guests. First up, we have my colleague and co-host for the evening, Jamie Campbell, Head of VC at 11FS. Jamie, I can see you've got your beer. Are you ready? How's it going?
They've given me an iPad, which is very optimistic.
You've gone rogue with the notes. Very digital, truly digital.
Old school. There's a couple of traditional bank people in the back I've seen. Don't worry, guys. I've got you.
Paper ain't dead just yet. Next up, we have Megan Caywood Cooper, founder and CEO of Caywood. Welcome to After Dark, Megan. How's the founder life treating you?
Yeah, it's great. Do we have any other fellow founder CEOs in here? Show of hands? Not many. Well, don't have much company, but yeah, no, it's excellent. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So it's good to be here.
They're all collapsed at home, crying.
Exhausted, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Also joining us tonight is Roisin, Levine, Head of UK and Europe Partnerships, Wise Platform. Wise. Welcome to After Dark. How are you doing? What's going on at Wise?
Thank you for inviting me back. All is good. I actually work just around the corner, so only a 2-minute commute for me, and walk past this every day, but yet did not know this venue existed. So loving it. It's very good. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks very much for taking time out. And completing our stacked lineup tonight, please welcome to the stage Javed Anjum, CEO at OneBanx.
I made it without tripping.
Top job. Yeah. Javed has gone really big. This is your first podcast?
Yes, it is.
Go big or go home.
Absolutely. Not nervous at all.
The audience is going to be very kind, I'm sure, and you're going to smash it. So what should people know about you and your work at OneBanx?
So OneBanx is a shared banking pioneer. We've been busy opening a lot of shared banking kiosks where customers can come and use cash and treat it as a bank branch, even if they bank with a bank that doesn't have a bank branch in that town. I've specifically used the words cash and branch because a lot of people here do not recognize those words. And so a little bit of context, 6,000 less branches today than 10 years ago means that while a lot of us have moved to digital banking, we're very comfortable with it, there are always people that are left behind, and it has created 2 big problems in the UK. The first is we've created our own financial exclusion problem, and we are in that space where we are helping people who are not digitally comfortable on how to use digital banking and use that to access cash at the same time. And then the second problem is how do you help the SMEs which want to accept cash when someone comes and buys with a fiver that they've had in their pocket for a year? And where does that fiver go after that? And we're helping in that space as well. Completely different from where traditional fintech and digital sits, but all our platform is digital. It's all based in open banking, and therefore I'm here. So thank you.
Fintech is a very broad church. Right, we have our brilliant guests. We have an amazing live audience. Now we just need some news. I suspect there probably is some. Let's get into the show. Our first story is Revolut is poised to target Middle East banking license as the bank hits 10 million UK users. So Bloomberg has reported that Revolut has submitted applications to become an electronic money institution in the UAE and is also looking to expand into Saudi Arabia. The move has been backed by Abu Dhabi's sovereign investor Mubadala, who have invested in Revolut. Revolut boss Nick Storonsky said at the Dubai Fintech Summit back in May that he wants to build a truly global bank. This comes as it hit 10 million users in the UK last week, so it's now level pegging with Monzo. Javed, I'll come to you first. You made the mistake of telling us backstage that you've lived in Dubai in the past. Can Revolut break the Middle East?
I think, first of all, if you're supported by Mubadala, one of the world's biggest sovereign wealth funds, I don't think you have a choice. Well, I think it's a tough market to break, to be honest, because there are lots of incumbent banks like Emirates NBD and others who have been creating digital and very modern products over the past decades. And therefore, it's a very different market to break into. They don't have as much gap in the market when it comes to exchange rates and good exchange products and remittance products. So I think it's going to be challenging, but I'm pretty sure they'll make it.
I like, the Middle East is a place where everyone outside of the Middle East wants to do business. So you're probably setting up a subsidiary there, or you're probably trying to get clients there or do business there. And I think Revolut's partnership with Visa and Visa Direct that gives them an interesting remittance play is great news for people who are trying to do local business, who are maybe not necessarily based there full time. And I think that gives them a nice little edge and kind of makes that doing business locally a little bit easier. But I think we can probably come on to some of the stats of Revolut a bit later on. But it's a big step in their global domination bank plan.
Yeah. Megan, what do you think? How close is Revolut to their dreams of world domination?
Yeah, I mean, the UAE does get them closer. I think the interesting thing about Dubai is that they've really been looking to diversify the revenue in the region. They've been doing a hard push into fintech. They've been doing a lot of recruiting and poaching from the UK to that extent. I think from Revolut's perspective, when we kind of ask that question, like who's courting who, is Nikolai trying to pursue the UAE or are they pursuing him? I would kind of expect it's actually the MENA coming to Revolut and pursuing it from that angle. That being said, I think one of the interesting stats that we discussed backstage was about 10% of the wealth, or about most of the wealth is held by 10% of the individuals in the region. So then there becomes a question of, for the audience they're targeting, how does that expansion look in that region? And would Nubank actually be better poised to serve that market, given it's a bit more synonymous with the customers that they're currently serving? So I think there is a big opportunity, but it'll be interesting to see how they break into it there.
Yeah, absolutely. Roisin, keen to bring you in as well. What was your take on the story?
I think this is definitely this kind of attractive element for fintechs and banks in the MENA region at the moment we're seeing. So we're seeing kind of a lot of vision from that region saying, you actually want to be fintech friendly. We'd love to see more partnerships, more innovation coming in. And so Revolut not the only player to start to think about entering that market. What's clear is this is about as much probably international payments. We see this huge remittance activity. Growing business hubs means more transactions, and growing economy and population growth also means more remittances as well in and out. So there is this big opportunity. At Wise, we know this opportunity to be huge, of course. I think 2 trillion personal remittance space and around about 9 trillion in kind of SME movement of money globally. And that keeps going up every year. So we can assume that there's high growth as well in that region, which I'm sure is why lots of fintechs are probably thinking about that.
It's always nice to get Wise people commenting on Revolut stories. Is there...
It's a setup.
So, of the companies that are all looking at the MENA region, I'm assuming there's a Wise play there?
So currently we actually allow transfers to the UAE at the moment. So Wise obviously globally, and we are of course looking at the region, the market as it develops. As I said, there's loads of interesting things going on, really high growth. So expect to see quite a few new people and the players in the market.
Because the Nubank angle is also quite interesting because we know that they've made very promising steps to go in there, and I think Megan's point is absolutely right. Where does Revolut pitch this? Do they take a look at the premium segment? Or arguably, there's less people but more capital, or do they look at a different segment with slightly different configuration of products? Maybe you've got a view on that.
Jamie,
what do you think?
I was going to say that when you look at the demographics, UAE is probably just the entry point. The bigger prize is Saudi because in terms of the size of market, UAE is simply not big enough if you don't take into account the bigger region, and Saudi being the biggest market out over there. So I do see that, and also Revolut is exotic for them in that part of the world, and it's well known, and therefore it really helps them. I'm not sure about Nubank, whether it has that brand awareness yet.
Yeah, I think people often make this mistake of just assuming, well, we can go launch in UAE and then we'll just lift and shift into Saudi. Like, I think having done quite a lot of research, spoken to consumers in KSA, it is a completely different landscape. There are completely different cultural expectations, completely different challenges that people face with their money. So I think, and it's also a completely different regulatory environment. Like the Saudi regulator has a very strong stance on trying to encourage the domestic talent, trying to grow innovation from within the Saudi system, trying to find ways to bring fintech into the lives of Saudi consumers without disrupting necessarily the traditional banking system. So yeah, I'm intrigued as well. Like, I think going after UAE, I can sort of see the logic there, but just assuming that you can nail the UAE and therefore Saudi will fall, it seems a little bit like naive. I don't know, maybe that's...
Yes, I agree. And I think you have to keep in mind the local competition as well. A little bit of experience 10 years ago, when I came here, I was traveling a lot. I was used to the offers that I saw in the UAE. 5% cashback was pretty normal for international transactions. And you come here and then all of a sudden I was racking up, pounds on fees, hundreds of pounds. And I went on the website and looked for possible options. And post office was the first option. I hope no one's here from the post office, but they're a great solution. But it wasn't what I was looking for. It was just go to the post office and get cash. Revolut was right at the bottom with the disclaimer saying, at your own risk, it might not exist in 6 months. And I went with Revolut because it offered something better. Now take Revolut and put it in that market, for example, KSA, you'll have to see how it fares against the competition there. I think that will be where the prize will be. Yeah,
very, very scientific study. How many people in our audience tonight have got a Revolut card? Oof.
Everyone.
For listeners at home, that's a lot of hands. That's a lot of hands.
How many people have got more than £100 on it? Less.
I'm really surprised. I'm really surprised there are people with cash because well done, everyone. You can use our services.
Megan, I guess the other angle Revolut are just always doing interesting stuff, right? They keep us very busy on Fintech Insider. They've also announced that they are launching a separate investment app. So yeah, keen to get your thoughts on that. Do you think they're going to be really challenging in the investment space as well?
Yeah, I think this is very consistent with their strategy since the beginning. I think they've always done some interesting integrations, really look to diversify the revenue stream. I think if you look in the wealth space, it's clearly large and growing, particularly in the UK. The UK has historically been quite debt-laden, but we're starting to see that shift, particularly with the great wealth transfer that we're seeing over the next 10 years. I think it kind of echoes probably some of the sentiments that we've seen from others in this space, like JP Morgan acquiring Nutmeg. So yeah, I think it's not super surprising given the opportunity that exists and their strategy to diversify.
I'm super interested to see what they do because obviously they took a real bold step, being one of the first, of the larger fintechs to really tackle alternative assets and investing like crypto and backing that strategy very hard at a time where it was almost perfect timing to do that, but obviously exposing a bunch of retail investors to that particular asset class, is interesting, and I'm curious to see how that, I guess, pioneering attitude and generally optimistic and positive approach to investing in assets will translate to this new thing, and whether they'll do something expressly different, or whether it will be something that we've seen before, or similar to the stuff that we've seen before, robo and kind of catering to a kind of a more of a mass affluent client, or whether there is something kind of more grander in their plans. I think that's a really interesting space to keep a view and an eye on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess they've always talked about, sorry, I'm going to use the phrase super app, so everyone has to down their drinks instantly as part of our Alone First drinking rules. They've talked about becoming a super app, and I can't quite understand how you become a super app by having multiple apps. I don't know if I've just missed some, I don't know. Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I mean, the original concept for it, I think, was more popularized in Southeast Asia and in China, things like WeChat. I think the idea from Revolut's perspective initially was, let's go into different types of financial products, integrate them in. They would do one or two in each different field, looking to diversify revenue streams. Obviously, the one that ended up landing was with crypto being like a key revenue driver. I think from their perspective, it's just difficult with financial services to do a super app like WeChat, because it's not like you're buying a bus ticket. It's not like a movie ticket. You're actually putting money into an investment product. So it takes a different type of strategy to build it. And so I think that's why we see more of kind of a dedicated, large kind of investment into this rather than some of the super apps that we've seen out of Southeast Asia.
I also think there's only so full an app can get before it gets shit. It's like, and
Agreed.
Yeah. Anyone want to take that?
That's good.
And I think when you look at the Monzos and the Revoluts of this world, of where they started and where they're at now, they are incredibly complete, very feature rich. You kind of wonder where their headroom is, and it's and for a digital product which is going to be very different to cash flow management, I assume. There's only so many places you can go in, to extend an existing product before it gets bloated and it detracts from everything else. And so I think that whilst there is the cash flow super app thing, which is the Revolut that we know today, I think is easier. I think when you start to add in these totally new business lines, with arguably a different type of product experience that's needed at the heart of it, I think it's actually justified. And I think it is justified to move away from that super app piece to tackle something this big and hairy.
Oh yeah, we definitely know that Revolut are not frightened of tackling big challenges. They're going to keep us busy. Okay, we're going to have to move on to our next story now. Our next story, we've taken it from Finextra, but it's getting lots of coverage, lots of places. That is Chase to offer credit cards in the UK. So the world's largest credit card issuer is reportedly testing cards aimed for the UK market. Chase UK launched its JP Morgan Chase's retail banking arm in 2021 as the bank's first foray into the retail space outside of the US. It's picked up more than 2 million customers, not too shabby, and £20 billion in deposits, more than either Monzo or Starling, and it's about to reach profitability. The UK side has won a number of plaudits at industry awards, including an 11th Award last year for the Consumer Game Changer. Megan, I'll throw to you first. I feel like you've got some history in credit cards. What's your verdict? Are you after a Chase credit card?
Yeah, I would give a Chase credit card a try. I think it makes a lot of sense. When they moved to the UK, I guess I should caveat by saying, first, I'm a big fan of JP Morgan. I think they've been doing some really interesting work. But whenever they came with a current account, they made a number of different loss-making introductory offers to incentivize customers to join the bank, to grow their deposit base. They've done that incredibly effectively. I think if we look at other incumbents who've taken a similar strategy, though, looking at Goldman Sachs when they launched Marcus, similarly making huge loss-making introductory offers to grow the deposit base, you then really need to focus on monetizing that. And one key way that you can do that is through credit. And so if you look at JP Morgan globally, they're the leader in the credit card offering. I think they have something like 219 billion or something on loan via their credit cards. Ooh, getting louder. But yeah, so JP Morgan has historically dominated in this space. They're now in the UK market. They have a significant number of deposits. So it makes sense that they would want to lend that out and to be able to monetize that more effectively. I think being an American in the US, the thing that always struck me about JP Morgan was their credit offerings are competitive on rewards, but they also had a good focus on the consumer design. They were the first ones in the US that had the metal card, now popularized by Revolut, but they had done some really fascinating research at the time around how whenever people were using the metal card, it would actually make them release dopamine. And so the kind of addictiveness of the material design was something that they were actually doing research around, which I thought was fascinating. But they also didn't have any foreign exchange fees, and this was pre-Revolut, pre-Monzo, pre-Starling. And so I think they did a really good analysis of what's important to customers. How do we do rewards? How do we really get competitive on fees? What do we do interesting from a design perspective? Even the usability of the app, I would say, when I moved from the US to the UK, I'll be honest, it was shocking to me in 2016 how horrid banking was. Because Chase, to be honest, in the US, it wasn't mind-blowing. It wasn't like the challenges in the UK, but it was okay. And so I think they've always really tried to continue to innovate. And I think one of the impressive things about JP Morgan is that despite their size and success, they don't seem to rest on their laurels. They keep taking risks and keep innovating. I think if you look back, it was probably around 2017 when they launched Fin in the US, if you remember that. And they built it on their core banking platform, and ultimately they retracted it, so they kind of considered it a failure. But then they clearly learned from that when they launched in the UK, took those lessons to heart, and they're now doing extremely well in their consumer offering here. So I think they're doing some interesting things. So yeah, I would try their credit card.
Roisin, have you ever had a dopamine hit from using a metal?
I mean, I don't know. That sounds kind of exciting, but I know that Chase UK definitely has got some really strong advocacy. Like there was a lot of excitement when they released the current account and the debit card product, and as you said, there was a lot of rewards in that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is similar engagement and excitement with the release of credit card. I think that we don't know exactly what it will look like yet. It seems quite early stages, but clearly they have got things quite right on that customer experience point, because there are a lot of people who are quite happy, and as I said, the deposit's quite high, and 2 million customers is substantial. So we'll be very interested to see what happens now.
Oh, yeah, I saw a lot of JP Morgan names on the list when I was looking at the attendees. So
I've seen them here as well.
yeah, does anyone want to tell us what
Hanging
it's...
by the
they're
bar.
waving. Exclusive, please. Yeah, what's it going to be like?
What kind of rewards can we
There's
expect?
head shakes. No, okay, fine.
What's the cash back?
How much?
Jamie, how do you... I mean, we've got to be semi-polite, I guess, if they're here, but how do you rate their chances of taking the UK credit market by storm?
Yeah, I think quite highly, because I think we covered it earlier, but the way in which they went about the current account offering was pretty bold. First year, incredibly high rates, 1% cash back on roundups, and they did something quite different in terms of like offering it wasn't just the user experience of the app that turned the commodity banking products into something worthwhile. It was like, yeah, we're going to do all of that, plus we're going to give you these added benefits, and really throw the JP weight behind it, which I think is what kind of foreshadows the excitement behind them putting a credit card into the market. And I think it was earlier in the summer they effectively, through I assume a press release, had doubled down on the UK and said that the success of the Chase launch has led to them making the UK maybe a larger part of their strategy. So we're expecting to see something come out anyway. I think the credit card is absolutely sensible to take a real challenge to Barclaycard, who outside of Amex doesn't really have any other big massive challenges that can kind of eat their lunch on this. And and if JP approach it in the same way that they did their current account launch, I think we could expect some, without kind of making a couple of the JP people excited, I think we could probably expect something quite good, quite rewarding, at least for the first year, for anyone who has a Chase account still.
And I suppose for any customer, all competition is good, right? So if we see more entrants to a market, releasing cool products, it's going to be great for end customers if we see that competition. So I imagine people will be excited.
And they've got so many deposits in the UK now. Like they've got to just it's sensible to start looking into these areas to start really driving some monetization.
Yeah. Javed, what's your take? As they roll out credit cards in the UK, is there anything you think they should be watching out for?
I think I would say that I would give it a try, certainly. There's, as Jamie said, there is that gap in the market still. There's one incumbent doing really well, and let's see what they come up with. So certainly an opportunity for people like me to try new things, which is good, as you said.
I think from a customer nerd perspective, which is how I generally self-describe, I think credit cards are one of the most interesting financial products when you look across markets, because you see just such different patterns in behavior, such different cultural norms around credit card usage. It still blows my mind every time I speak to a customer in the US, every time I speak to a customer in Singapore. They'll literally like crack open their wallet or their purse and like 13, 14 credit cards fall out. And people can like rifle through them and be like, this one's for this, this one's for this, this one's for this. You know, this one has this reward, this reward, this reward. It's just a completely different customer environment. And so I suppose I'm intrigued to see how Chase moves. You know, again, are they just trying to lift and shift their credit card model from the US to the UK market? Because I think the last stat I saw said that the average UK consumer has, I think, 1.7 credit cards. So, I mean, it's a very different credit environment.
See my 0.7 of credit card in my wallet.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. Yeah, when I first moved from San Francisco to London and I was working at Starling, one of the key things I found interesting is how many people would just spend on their current account. In the US, it's pretty much unheard of. You would always spend on your credit card, pay it off each month. And that's what you do because the interchange is so high that you get really good rewards. So it would make a lot of sense. And to be fair, people would have a lot of these strategies where you typically have these 5 credit cards in rotation. You save the one with the longest credit history because that influences your credit score, but you would rotate the others out in order to just maximize benefits and rewards. And that's quite common, but in the UK, it's very different. So I'm curious. I mean, yeah, as you were saying earlier, at Barclays, where I used to work, they obviously are the contender in the space. They have the new Amazon credit card, which is brilliant. So, you know, just to put a plug in. But
Did you work on that?
yeah, no. So I had a
Yes.
yes. Yeah. So it was one of the things that they have a brilliant team there and are working on it. But to be fair, I think your point is spot on. You have Barclay card, you have Amex. And there's not a huge amount of competition. Chase does really well in the US with the interchange and the rewards they can give there. But I think in a different market with lower credit usage, with lower interchange, with typically lower rewards, I'm really interested to see how they come in to try to differentiate. I think here also consumers are having higher expectations on the user experience and things just like transparency around the cost of credit, things that are more important here than maybe in other regions that they operate in. So it'll be good to see what they do.
Jamie, I guess the other interesting angle to this is, we covered it on the show last week, talk about JPM potentially taking over the Apple Card deal. I know a lot of people are really hoping that the Apple Card is going to come to the UK pretty soon. How do you see potentially that new partnership impacting a sort of standalone Chase credit card?
Do we know if it's happening? Is it rumor still? I think it's still rumor.
I mean, there's enough
rumor.
people here where if we decide it's a rumor,
yeah.
Fact or fiction?
This is happening. No, I think the impact will be, that the brand benefit that you get from kind of being delivered via an Apple product will obviously, Goldman, benefited from it initially. It's not worked out. It'd be interesting to post-mortem that and how, if JP were to relook at this, how they would approach it and the differences that they would make to that. But ultimately, I think it's going to come down to, the customer experience of paying with a credit card is the same as, whatever. That bit is the bit that doesn't really matter. It's all the other stuff that goes around it that's going to be the differentiating features. So,
I think one thing that will be interesting to see as well, which I believe right now it's not necessarily fact or fiction, it's just still being decided. I think in the article it actually references the particular exec at JP Morgan who's leading the deal to kind of sort it out. But I think the reality is with the gammas, as we call them now, Google, Apple, Meta, Amazon, is that whenever they approach these deals, they do bring so much weight to the negotiation. And obviously with Goldman Sachs, initially they thought that they could build a customer base and that would ultimately be a positive, but ultimately ended up not being economically feasible. And I think part of that was the way that they had built the platform. So they built it on top of a third-party platform. They had a high cost base, and then they negotiate very hard with Apple, and so their margins are thin. And so what can initially look quite lucrative ends up actually not being a deal you really want to have. So I'll be fascinated to follow the story to see if JP Morgan, being a gigantic financial institution, typically with really good relationships with the large tech organizations, if they're able to negotiate a more savvy deal, or if they have a platform that runs at a lower cost base to make it make sense. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we're going to keep an eye on it, obviously. Let's move on to our third story, powering through. This story is covered in FinExtra, and that is 28% of UK adults say they've been targeted by a voice cloning scam in the last year. According to new research from Starling Bank, scammers can convincingly clone someone's voice from as little as 3 seconds of audio. With this, scammers can mimic voicemails, voice messages, and even choreograph phone calls to trick family and friends into sending money over urgently. Starling's researchers found that 1 in 10 would send over whatever was asked for in this situation. Meanwhile, just 30% say that they would know what to look out for to spot a voice cloning scam. To prove how sophisticated these scams can be, Starling actually filmed the actor James Nesbitt, I don't think anyone's come across him before, trying to guess if he was hearing his own voice or an AI. So if the technology allows us, let's see if we can have a look.
The first part I played in a musical was The Artful Dodger.
That's me, definitely. People are... What? Oh my God. That honestly is incredible.
Very demure, very mindful.
Me talking about myself? Probably, yeah. Oh, come on. That's the sort of thing I might say about myself.
Well, of course, I haven't auditioned for many years now. They just present stuff to me. Actually, that's a joke.
Well, that is definitely me, because it's a sort of shy and unassuming thing I would say. Yoo-hoo!
And so I fell in love with Manchester City from a very early age, and I've loved them ever since.
Well, come on, we know that that's not true. Manchester City don't deserve to be fallen in love with.
One of my first favourite co-stars that lasted a length of time is Adrian Dunbar.
Definitely me. I'm going to see him next week on stage. He's one of my great inspirations, one of my heroes. I said that recently.
Oof, yeah, he didn't do well, did he? Javed, would you be confident you could distinguish your own voice from an AI voice?
There are two angles to this. Obviously, from the customer experience perspective, biometric in general, and voice biometric is amazing. I use it with my bank. I'm going to have to change my voice while I speak. But there's a challenge here, which has always been recognized by the industry, which is that, as an example, you can replace the pins for everyone, for those using chip and pin. But what do you do when you have a breach on biometric? It's something that you are, and therefore security is paramount. We've had experience as well of this at OneBanx, not of the breach, but actually offering biometric to our customers. So we started with, just imagine the experience, just walking up to a device, saying that you wanted to withdraw or deposit something into your account, or wanted to see your mini statement or a statement, and you just show up and it looks at you and offers you the services. It was a beautiful experience, but majority of the customers came back and said they don't trust it. They felt like it was like Big Brother. How did it work? I didn't do anything. So we had to switch it off and move to multi-factor authentication. The user experience isn't great, but people feel comfortable with it. So I think there's always that angle of, with this, would I ever use voice biometric again? I'll be nervous about this. And therefore, I think this is not good news in general.
Yeah. Roisin, what's your take on stats like this? Is this influencing what you guys are doing at Wise?
I think we're always worried about this kind of thing at Wise. So it's a huge part of what we do is trying to educate customers about potential scams. And I guess the really tricky part in this is that the technology keeps adapting. So as we're seeing here, it's getting so much more sophisticated. So you might have a kind of fallback solution of how you make sure you verify someone, and suddenly that's changed. So it's kind of keeping pace with that change, which is really difficult. The only way that we can tackle this, and it's what all fintechs and banks have to do, is just invest very heavily. So about a third of our investment goes into keeping customers safe in some way. So this means things like looking at machine learning to recognize patterns, having a really great customer support team on hand when people need that. But really a lot of this is trying to keep up with the pace of things where technology can be exploited. It's amazing in many ways, and AI is going to hopefully release a lot of efficiencies, but it can also be used by bad actors. So very, very tricky. We've actually done some of our recent own research on kind of scams and these kind of things. And one of the things I find very interesting is actually that we found that the age range was slightly different in terms of people who were affected by scams. So I think there's a general thought that it might be older generations. In our research, we actually found that quite a lot of Gen Y and Millennial and Gen X actually were more susceptible to getting scammed. And so this is kind of interesting. It makes you realize quite how sophisticated things have got, but quite digitally native people also getting quite confused. And obviously Starling stats are pretty scary as well on the people may have had some sort of issues so far.
Yeah. Megan, as someone who's in the process of building a completely new proposition, like how early into the design process is compliance, security coming into your planning?
Well, yeah, I'm probably unique because I've always worked in financial technology, so it's always a baseline consideration. But I think for large organizations, small organizations, it's only of increasing importance. I think the security around ensuring biometrics are authentic needs to be, at pace with fraudsters who are getting increasingly savvy at using these tools as well. And it's coinciding with the new app scam regulation that's coming into force on 7th October. So for banks, now they're having to make customers whole on fraud on their account up to $85,000, whereas it used to be optional, but now it's legally mandated. So I think across financial institutions, the regulator is really cracking down to ensure that customers are protected against fraud. It's becoming increasingly savvy, and banks and financial institutions need to take on the burden of responsibility of keeping customers safe and helping them to determine what's authentic versus fraudulent. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important.
And we were talking about this backstage, saying how the liability is split between the bank which has issued the payment effectively and the bank that has received the payment. So clarifying that it's a shared liability, that the receiving bank needs to make sure that the people that they are effectively banking, are not using those accounts for fraudulent activity. And I think that dynamic, adds a really interesting and collaborative approach, which should add a really interesting and collaborative approach for banks and e-money institutes and whoever to share resources, share information to really nail these things down.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If you read the news articles on it, it's quite focused on the impact of smaller banks, and will mandating this have a disproportionately large impact on them. But I think from my experience at Starling, even though it was optional, it was something they always optionally did to support customers. So I think actually there is some sort of support being given, and now this legislation saying actually the receiving bank has to be equally liable for the burden of making the customer whole in these fraudulent situations.
On the totally other end of the spectrum, it's an incredibly interesting space. As soon as you dip your toe into looking at, investing in this area of security and I guess the counter to AI that can be used to defraud people or breach security in a massive way. It's something that we've been looking a little bit at because part of our interest at 11FS is looking not only at businesses that are financial services businesses, but anything that is supporting the smooth running of this financial services like infrastructure and ecosystem. It's been kind of fascinating to see the various different players that are out there existing that are building bespoke products that are effectively deployed within banks and other institutions to counter these various approaches. But it's an incredibly changing. I'd actually not seen that video before, and it was quite something.
I'm almost entirely relying on the fact that my parents would know that I would never directly ask for money. Like I always have to concoct some very elaborate pre-build. There's kind of like how are you? Oh gosh, this has gone wrong. Whereas I feel like a fraudster would be like, Mum, send me 85K now.
To my friend's bank account.
This can't be Katie. That's all right.
They'd be like, wait a minute, that's way too blatant. She's not tried to fool me at all. If you set aside that, realistically, Megan, what can Fintech actually do? What can they actually do to help customers avoid these types of situations?
Yeah, I think that's the question. I used to be on the Digital Tech and Cyber Board at UK Finance. So it's a trade organization that represents financial institutions. And we would frequently have this topic on advancing technology, advancing fraud, what we do to protect customers. And the consensus just continually kept coming back to we need to continually invest in reinforcing our security systems and our security protocols. And some of the answers we still don't yet have, and we need to collaborate as an industry to define. And that's just kind of the reality of the situation.
And on our side, we see a lot of this on a daily basis in terms of customers coming in wanting to transact on behalf of, into their accounts, which might be, one account to another or any one of the banking institutions in the UK. And what we've done is we're very strong on KYC and KYB. And that's on top of all the security that the banks have implemented on their side when it comes to electronic transactions as well. So as a user, when you come into OneBanx, you have to, first of all, onboard yourself, provide your ID and all the details. We've recently had a situation where I know it's nothing to do with ID, but slightly related in that someone came in and deposited loads of coins, which all looked fake. But we knew straight away who it was. And we blocked the user, for example, and took appropriate action. We later found out that there is a trade in the UK where a number of these coins come in from the Far East, from the fountains. Someone collects them from the fountains, then they're shipped over here, and then someone needs to deposit them. So they were all okay, actually, in reality. But just an example of the kind of things we're able to detect because we're doing a slightly more enhanced due diligence in the beginning and KYC and KYB.
I think one of the other modern approaches is actually using content. So what Starling has done, I don't know if any of you follow them on social media, but they put out a series of posts saying things like, we love to speak to you, but just so you know, we're never going to call you. They're trying to actively communicate through content creation on Instagram, on Facebook, on X, as we call it now, to communicate to customers what would be an authentic communication from them versus what wouldn't be. So I think there's multiple angles of how do we do some of the more traditional methods, looking at KYC, KYB, effective onboarding, consistency of customer transactions, how do we increasingly use, AI, machine learning, and fraud detection, but then some other simpler tools of let's just tell customers, if you get this, it's definitely fake. And so I think there's kind of a mixed means for it.
I was going to say that Starling campaign is a good example of something that has high engagement probably because it's kind of interesting and they've got people looking at it, and actually that probably does help the rest of the industry. So take inspiration from these kind of things and what others are doing. How can you bring attention to something that's not the funnest subject really? So you have to be quite creative in how you're positioning it to customers to make them engage with it. But we hope that it doesn't have to sort of slow things down too much and create too much friction in the onboarding experience. But of course, we do have to do that if it keeps customers safe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess the other thing I wanted to get the Wise perspective on this specifically is it must be even harder to manage this when you're an international global business. Talk us through some of the additional complexities that maybe someone who's stressing about, just within the bounds of the UK, they probably don't realize how lucky they are, right? There must be additional challenges.
Exactly. So we have a huge amount of our investment, as I said, goes into compliance and keeping customers safe. I think we have over 1,000 employees who kind of work just in that sense of kind of all the robustness that our systems need. Everything has to be screened. We have to do these things in real time as well because we want money to move very quickly. So one of the ethos of Wise is that we try our best to make sure payments move instantly. But obviously with that means your systems also need to be very quick in real time. So all of this takes huge dedication, both from a kind of personnel and from a kind of technology investment point of view, to get it right because it is so important.
Yeah.
And I think one thing to add from my side is that it's quite interesting and maybe not very well known that when you go in and you want to put something into your account, the level of due diligence or the level of compliance required is really stringent. So while we all want to create an experience that obviously is frictionless, we have all of those things to look at, and no one wants a fine from the regulators.
No fines, please. Okay, now it's time for our and finally, where we take a look at something a little bit more offbeat, hopefully slightly more uplifting than fraud. Is it not?
I think the first one, we'll see.
Forgive me, Fintech, for I have sinned. It's time to share our Fintech confessions. Ahead of tonight's show, we asked you, our audience, both here in the room and listening at home, to send in your Fintech confessions. As we're in a church tonight, we are going to use the collective power of us, Fintech Insiders, to relieve you of your sins so you can continue to work in Fintech with a clear conscience. We're going to give our thoughts as a panel on whether they should be forgiven or not, and we're going to ask you, our audience in the room, to have the final say on whether we're going to forgive people or not. So, first up, we have an obviously anonymous confession from a podcast fan who we are calling the Monzo Fair Dodger. So, here's a confession. Brace yourselves. When I say, I'm going to read this out in the first person, it's not me. I'm just being out there as I go.
This is not an admission of guilt.
No. When I first moved to London and money was tight and Monzo was called Mondo, I'd use the freeze card option before tapping into the tube, so my commute was £0. Oof. The DLR quickly became the free LR. See what they did there? Morals and finances have allegedly improved since then. So, Javed, what do you think? Are you going to forgive them?
Well, since the morals have improved, we have no choice but to forgive.
Oh, gosh, that's very forgiving.
Oh,
Jamie?
God. This is transaction fraud, though, right? So if I actively say that I'm forgiving this person, does it, how does this, hey, look, we're colleagues, right?
Yeah.
If I say I forgive this, is that going to be bad? I'm still trying. I'm not. It's not my,
David's not here,
Okay.
so it's fine.
I think it's rock and roll.
Yeah.
If
Okay. Megan, Roisin?
I'm going to leave all decisions to God.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was like, it's not, our place to judge here. But yeah, I mean, I typically am like more of the integrity without compromise route. But yeah, no judgment,
Okay, right. Now it's your turn. So if you think they can be forgiven, give them a cheer. And if you think they shouldn't be forgiven, give them a boo.
I think
I think
forgiven.
it's forgiven.
Oh, it was close though. That was close.
that was close. I think we got a proper. I think we got a finance crew in,
I've got a finance crew.
and I think there's a couple of rock and roll fintech people scattered around.
I think they're forgiven. Let's be generous. Okay.
Also, can I just say I'm really disappointed that Usher's Confessions doesn't intro this whole segment.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I made a request as well to the
I think
team,
we're going to do that in the post edit.
Thank God.
Yeah.
and I'll do the voiceover. Yeah.
Okay, up next we have another, surprise, surprise, anonymous fintech fan who has this to confess. Fintech Insider Loveline. I once signed up to a fintech app because I heard the CEO on Fintech Insider and thought they had a sexy voice. Javed, have you ever signed up to something because of someone's sexy voice?
Not yet, no.
Megan?
I only use Barclays and Starling, so I don't think that's, I can't relate to that, no.
Oh, hang on. What?
I mean, he didn't have a fintech, but like I had a real thing for like Mark Carney's voice when he was governor of the Bank of England. Like, I was so sad when he stepped down. My husband is here as well, so this is really awkward. But
That doesn't make it any better.
I think your husband's fine. Mark Carney's, I think,
Oh no! It was just a voice. It was just a voice. Roisin, what about you?
I don't think so. I think someone in marketing is probably thinking, who is this? Which CEO could I put on more podcasts to get more customers? I think God will probably forgive this one, so we'll let it go.
Yeah, it's pretty. Who could this be? Genuinely, who could this be? I'm quite.
Like which CEO or which person?
Is that what they say? It's a CEO.
CEO of a fintech.
I was so embarrassed. I'm like, there can only be one. But like, are we all
Can
thinking
there
the
all
same
be one? I don't know. Hang on, whisper it. I think they can be forgiven. Because there are worse reasons to sign up for a fintech product.
Okay. Well, no, but the audience gets to decide. So, audience, if you think they're forgiven, give them a cheer. And if you're against sexy voices, give them a boo. There's some very non-sexy booing noises from the back. I think that person is forgiven. Okay. And last but not least, we have a confession from another, surprise, surprise, anonymous community member who we've labeled the Phantom Sneezer. So, they said, at a previous After Dark, I sat behind a very senior person who worked at the same company I did at the time. I had a really bad cold, drank too many beers, and accidentally sneezed on the back of their head. I still think I've gotten away with it. I think the main thing I wanted to know as soon as I read this was like, I think it massively varies depending on whether it was like a productive sneeze or not. Like, you all know the type of sneeze I'm talking about, like the one that kind of catches you unawares and there's like a projectile.
Oh, God. Why did they just cover their mouth? So
I
many
think
questions.
that one is unforgivable, maybe.
No, definitely unforgivable.
That is absolutely unforgivable.
I'm also thinking like this probably varies depending. If this was like pre-COVID, then everyone's rules towards personal hygiene were just generally very different. So that's also it's hard to gauge on that basis. I don't know.
That person could be here, by the way.
They could be here. I hope you're feeling better if you are.
Yeah. If anyone sneezes now, very high levels of scrutiny.
I feel like a church could be quite dusty as well, though, right?
It would also echo very loud, like
would
a
echo
lot, so
loudly.
you'd know who it was.
Yeah. Javed, have you ever sneezed on the back of someone's head?
And thought you got away with it?
I was supposed to say whether I could forgive him or not.
No, I'm not interested in that. No, I want the dirt.
So I actually had a very similar experience. And
Were you receiving end or giving end?
the giving end. And
Wait, is this your?
I was recently in Himeji in Japan, and where that person has retired and has opened up a bar. Let's just say all the colleagues went there. I didn't.
No.
Okay, right. Final time. Audience, if you think they're forgiven, give them a cheer.
Whoever has just cheered to that, we know who you are, and you're not going to be invited back.
Okay, and if you think it's unforgivable, give them a boo. Yeah, you disgusting person, you're not forgiven.
Does anyone on the panel have a confession? Are we doing this? Can we do this?
I think
we've got time.
Yeah.
We've got time. Yeah.
Anyone else got any
Anyone?
confessions?
Confession? I
don't think I should say anything now.
Obviously, it's not anonymous, but I thought it'd be funny to just doorstop you with this.
Okay, you're looking at me. I'll tell mine. It's not really a confession because it's like public knowledge, but it's the only thing I could think of when we were like sharing our stories backstage and trying to think of one. But back in 2017, whenever it was when Mondo became Monzo, so I was at Starling, and obviously we were very competitive, and we would stalk companies' house for anything that they did. And so we saw the name change before it was public. So we went, at the time they were getmondo.co.uk, if you guys recall. So we bought getmonzo.co.uk, because obviously they just took monzo.com. So anyways, we bought getmonzo.co.uk and redirected it to the Starling website and said, congratulations on the rebrand. And then we forced them to pay us to buy it back. But it was for a charitable donation. So I think we had like our customers vote as to which charity it went to. So that's all I got. That's my one fintech confessional.
Yeah.
I think we can forgive her for that one.
Yeah. Roisin, you got any confessions? Are you feeling inspired by our surroundings?
Nothing criminal, which I think is a good start.
Yeah.
Looked at her PR very good.
Yeah. The only fintech confession I kind of have, and it's not really a confession, is my husband works heavily in fintech too, and absolutely everyone assumes that we met in fintech. And we've kind of never bothered to correct that, but actually we met at a power ballad night in Camden, which I think is less forgivable in some ways.
Was it Club de Fromage?
It wasn't. It was a thing called Ultimate Power, which I don't think exists anymore for probably good reason. But yeah, that's the only thing I have close to a confession.
Got a bad one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
So
This is a safe religious space.
Yeah. This is going to get a lot of laughs, I think.
Okay, gosh, okay.
Embarrassing laughs. I was in a position to invest in a crowdfunding round of a challenger bank a few years ago. And there were two that were the options that I could invest in. One was Revolut during their crowdfunding round. The other was Tandem Bank. I invested in Tandem Bank instead of Revolut.
And now you're head of VC at 11FS.
That's the...
How's it going?
That's the first time, A, I've said that out loud to other people, and B, in front of a massive room of people that it could fall back on my job. But,
Jamie, have you done the math on that? I read an article the other day of someone who put in
yeah, I know. I've read the
3,000
article. I've read the article. It's very bad.
The losses are real.
The losses are real.
Wow. Okay, on that note, that concludes this live episode of Fintech Insider News. Thank you so much to today's guests, and thanks again to our sponsors, OneBanx. Where can people find out a bit more about you, Jamie? Crying somewhere.
Crying, yeah, exactly. The appreciation that people have that I'm just walking around feeling happy is probably higher now. But you can get me LinkedIn anywhere. Jamie Campbell, 11FS. I'm the only one, so say hi.
Similarly, LinkedIn, Megan Caywood Cooper.
Roisin?
LinkedIn, Roisin Levine, or if you're interested in international payment infrastructure, visit Wise Platform.
Who wouldn't? And Javed?
LinkedIn, as usual, Javed, Anjum, OneBanx.
Awesome.
No one does X anymore.
No one does
That
X.
used to be the thing,
That's actually really interesting.
Right?
No one does X
Yeah,
anymore.
all LinkedIn. Okay, that's noted.
A big round of applause for today's guests.
And for Kate Moody.
As for me, you can also find me on LinkedIn, also not on X. Or if you're in the church, I will be by the bagels. I can see there's a rush already. Wait a minute, I need some too. Trying to snag a Nutella bagel shortly. Thank you so much for listening. We really couldn't make this show without you. Remember, you can join the conversation by finding us on social media or email podcasts at 11fs.com. Thanks very much. Goodbye.